Hey fermenters, Austin Durant here, and the purpose of this video is to walk you through a Fermenters Club community and everything that it entails. Thanks for joining us. So here's what we're going to go over in this video. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fermenters Club and what it is, a tiny bit about my background, and then we're going to jump into what is a Fermenters Club community. We're going to talk about the guiding principles of how I envision communities, as well as the expectations of leaders. The assumption is if you're watching this video, you're at least somewhat interested in, if not participating in a community, then starting one in your town, which is great. I'll then walk through planning and execution of community gatherings, which are an integral part of a Fermenters Club community. And then, if you are ready, I'll guide you through the next steps on how to sign up to become one. Let's get started. So this is something I like to start off with, and just to show you that this is the flow chart for, do you have what it takes to join Fermenters Club? And the idea is, if you have a gut, you're a member of the club. So cheekiness aside, that's really the idea, is that this is something that everybody can and should participate in, and so the bar for getting in is very low. If you're a living being and you have a gut, you're welcome. So Fermenters Club started out about 12 years ago now as a passion project of mine, on my own journey to understand more about food in general, where it comes from, what are its qualities, what are buzzwords like seasonal, organic, what was real versus what was just sort of marketing chaff. And along that journey, I discovered the importance of nutrient-dense foods, and that is maybe a topic for another video. But one of the pillars of nutrient-dense foods is fermented foods. So these are foods that are enriched by microbial activity, and when we consume fermented foods, it delivers a whole host of benefits. So that inspiration is what set me on my journey to, first of all, found Fermenters Club, and then just go down the rabbit hole and started writing blog articles, and then eventually put up fermentersclub.com, and now it's sort of grown into my full-time business. So I teach, I love to teach. So sharing this knowledge, which is really ancient knowledge that's just been temporarily forgotten by many humans over the last few generations, bringing that back into the mainstream and really, getting people back into doing this practice, which again, our ancestors just did as part of the daily background of food preparation and preservation. So we're bringing it back. So I've got, like I said, fermentersclub.com. I have virtual pre-recorded classes. I've got live virtual classes as well as live in-person classes. And one of the main facets of the club is these communities. So really, a community is just, well, we'll go into a little bit what it is, but the idea is I'd love to see spontaneous communities popping up like mushrooms all over the countryside and all over the world, where you can revive this tradition in your town. Newsletters, and occasionally I'll do festivals. I've done festivals here on the west coast of the United States, as well as I do hands-on workshops, just really to get people doing this stuff, not just hearing about it, but actually doing it. So that's a brief overview of Fermenters Club. So again, a community, and I like to differentiate that with the capital C, is a single geographically based group that meets regularly in real life to conduct Fermenters Club gatherings, as well as other community-based activities promoting food fermentation. So again, the main thing that a community will do is have meetings or gatherings, and these are informal and free gatherings people can participate in to encourage fermented food enthusiasts to meet on a social basis, share recipes, share knowledge, share any extra cultures you might have, and just just meet. This is an important part of humanity, is meeting and sharing food together is something that's always been with us. So that's part of the idea here. So again, the gatherings are open to all people and are free to join. Now here are some of the guiding principles that I think are important to communicate and exemplify in practice. So, and this might help you understand, what my vision is and what a Fermenters Club community is and maybe what it isn't. So of course we want to focus on foods as the first principle. And I say that to differentiate us from fermented beverages, right? So there's quite a few delicious fermented beverages out there, many of which are alcoholic, beer and wine, spirits, that sort of thing. But our focus is on food. In other words, we're not a brewing club. That's not our focus. The idea is to help create awareness and celebrate these tonic foods, these things that that lift us up, that support our gut, support our health, support our communities. So the focus is on food as opposed to beer and wine. Another guiding principle is inclusion. We want to welcome people of all walks of life, all skill levels. Everybody's welcome. So this is not a snobby, oh, you don't know how to get fizzy kombucha yet, we'll come back when you do. Like, that's not the idea. We want people to be, who are curious, but maybe newbies, to come and learn from people who may be further along in their journey. Another principle along those lines of inclusion is intergenerational participation. I mean, this is something that I think our culture here in the West hasn't really done well, in my opinion, the last few generations. And so bringing in children, bringing in elderly people, working together, people from different generations working together and participating is important for knowledge sharing and learning that happens, sort of implicitly, right? So I want to encourage that as well. So that may give you ideas on how to reach out to different generations in terms of letting them know when you start up your community. Another principle, of course, is personal responsibility. Use your senses, use common sense when you're both preparing things but also conducting the meetings and letting people know, this is it's a safe practice, but if you're reckless or if you're not paying attention, you can do something that, could make something that spoils or that isn't really good to eat. So really just taking responsibility and becoming aware of what you're doing. Again, knowing that it's a relatively benign process that we cultivate, that we sort of manage as fermenters. So just, take personal responsibility. Another corollary to that is trust your senses. So this is something I advocate everywhere throughout my teaching, and that is we were born with a fully intact set of senses. We say we have 5, but we probably have something more like 20 or more, depending on who's counting. But the idea is that we need to get back into paying attention to those senses and knowing that our intuition and our perceptions are valid and that they tell us what's going on in the world and what's in front of us. And anyway, so when you're fermenting, trust your senses. If you're looking at something, if it looks really gross, smells, appears, just is unappetizing in any way, trust that sense. Don't override it just because you're like, oh, this is fermented, it's supposed to be funky. Yeah, that's true, but not to the extent where you're overriding what your body's telling you. So I think, again, that's a good principle to work with when we're doing something, especially that's new to us, just to trust your senses. And along with that, having a sense of curiosity. So, exploring these foods that have been around maybe a long time, even getting into things that maybe nobody's done before. So just being curious about everything relating to food, where it comes from, what you can do with it, etc. Another principle, seasonality, I think is important because this is something that we just did. When we were fermenting food to preserve it, we needed to, obviously, what was available was only that which was in season. Now we can enjoy lots of things, due to our global supply chains and our ability to get things quickly, we can maybe get something that's not in season where we are. But I want to encourage people to work with the seasons. You know, there's an abundance of certain things in different seasons, right? Like fruits are very abundant in the summer, and maybe your root vegetables and your brassicas, your cauliflowers, your cabbages, etc., are more of a cool season crop. So just working with that seasonality, I think you're going to find the results of fermentation itself will be better, but also the quality of the food is typically better. You're able to get things, you know, more locally, which is important for high quality. So just practice seasonality as you're doing this, and you can think about that in terms of, okay, as I'm planning my next gathering, you know, what season is it going to be? Is it going to be, you know, July? Well, we're probably going to want to focus on pickles because, you know, there's pickling going on, and cucumbers are in season by that point for most of us. So just think about that when you're just in general, but also when you're doing fermentation and when you're thinking about how to share it in the community. Another principle is, of course, interconnectedness and interdependency, and that kind of goes along with the final number 9 as well. And the idea is that everything is interconnected, whether it's, you know, the farmers that are growing our food. We are intimately dependent on them to be successful and to be healthy, to give us, you know, what we need to help preserve the harvest. So there's a lot of just interconnectedness in general, not only with those who grow our food, but those who will consume it, right? So that's just the idea. It's just, again, it's a mindset to think about how does this practice connect in with other parts of our community, and how are we interdependent on other disciplines, other people, other trades, other industries to be successful. So yeah, that can often mean cross-pollinating with other disciplines. So if you're thinking about you know, maybe speakers for your next gathering, where can we pull them from the community? You know, whether that's a food-forward chef that's working with fermented foods in his or her restaurant, or whether it's you know, there's a university that's studying gut microbiome stuff, you know, science, and so that's important. And other people who may have old-timey ways of preserving food, and, you know, just thinking about it in terms of that. We're not siloed in any way. We're heavily dependent and interdependent on other disciplines. So I think having those guiding principles in mind as you walk through this journey will help you. And there's probably plenty more, and you bring your own values to the table. But these are, you know, principles that I think are important. So next, I want to go over the expectations of a community leader. So they're pretty straightforward, but want to just articulate them here. So the first thing that you're doing is you are representing Fermenters Club in your town. And that means you are exemplifying the guiding principles as well as practicing the ethical standards of that we're laying out here. So we'll talk about the ethical standards in a moment. And, you know, the basic task is to organize and lead public community meetings. Hopefully we're getting at least 6 to 10 people, and you are conducting them at least quarterly, so 4 meetings a year. And in this, you know, hopefully you've already got this inside of you, but sharing your knowledge and love about fermented foods with the community. That's just going to make a good leader, evangelist for fermented foods. And, you know, this is also about growing the membership, so conducting outreach efforts in your town in order to do that. And just based on having done this for a few years, the time commitment is pretty minimal, somewhere between 5 and 10 hours per month. So hopefully this is something that you can fit into your busy schedule, because it's very rewarding. Okay, let's talk about the ethical standards. So they go hand in glove with the guiding principles. So just become familiar with the guiding principles and exemplify them and learn them if they're new to you. But, you know, as a community leader, you want to set an example by your actions and your behavior. So, you know, comport yourself with the highest level of morality, integrity, kindness and patience, because there's going to be a lot of people that are new to this stuff and have different levels of knowledge, and just be open to them all. So you're representing Fermenters Club, but also you're an ambassador for a long tradition of fermented foods and the trillions of microbes that create them. So yeah, just comport yourself that way, and you'll be very successful. And finally, so there will be a handbook that I'm making available as well, if that's just to have as a reference guide. So really I would want you to only use the materials that we publish and that Fermenters Club publishes in ways that are appropriate and that are laid out in the handbook. But of course, this is a fluid and dynamic and ever-changing thing, and it relies upon you guys as people out in the community to reflect back and give us feedback as to what works, so that we can improve how the other communities work. So just reach out to us, reach out to me, and anytime if you've got more ideas on how to use the materials and how they could be used. And that will be peachy keen. So let's get into the actual kind of the format of the meetings themselves. There'll be a deep dive in a little bit here, but at a very quick high level, the idea is find a public place to meet, and we'll talk about why it's important to meet in public as opposed to somebody's home or a private place. Generally, you want to schedule meetings about 4, maybe 5 or 6 weeks in advance at the latest, just to let people know, give them enough time to get it into their schedules. And it's not so far out that people are like, oh yeah, I'll go to that, and then they forget about it. So there's a good sweet spot, about 4 to 6 weeks to schedule a meeting, and then getting the word out. So that could look different from community to community, but you want to invite as many people and let everybody know that you're meeting, and that get some buzz, get some excitement. Generally, the meetings last about 2 hours, and every 1 to 3 months is a good pace. Depends on, again, where you live. Weather constraints are often a constraint. So every 2 months, every 3 months is a good pace, so that people don't get burned out. They can look forward to something, especially if it's a changing of the seasons. Within each meeting, it's a good idea to have either a topic or a theme, possibly a guest speaker, whether that's a member, whether that's you as the leader, whether that's a member of the community, whether that's another member of the club, just to kind of give about 30 to 45 minute presentation on whatever the topic is, and we'll do a deeper dive into what those topics might be. But also, as part of the meeting, we want to have a social hour, a potluck. People can bring dishes, mostly fermented, not 100%. Does everything have to be fermented? Obviously, if you're bringing sauces or salsas, you want to have stuff to dip them into. But the idea is to have a potluck with mostly fermented foods. You're sharing these different foods, but also sharing cultures. So if you're a kombucha maker, or you have kefir or sourdough, you can bring your starter and culture and share that and spread it out to the community. So often encouraged to have those. So also want to bring reusable plates, cups, and silverware, just to minimize the amount of trash and waste that we're creating. So again, that's a quick overview. We'll take a deep dive into each of these in a little bit. So as far as planning the gatherings and executing them, I kind of like to break it down into where, when, who, what, and how. And each of these is, how to create a successful community gathering.